my name is Beck and welcome to my reaction to Daniel Greene's favourites of 2021. I am not sure exactly what I want this video to be, but I wanted to look at different booktubers' favourite books of last year and see kind of how they measured up to mine and whether our reading taste would be pretty similar, and if I would have any books that they've read but I haven't, which I might potentially try out in the future to see how close our reading taste would be. So I thought, why not start with Daniel Greene? So let's go.
Hello everybody and welcome to the beginning of the end of 2021, where I get to do the oh-so-algorithm-friendly list week, starting now. Not exactly the beginning of the week. And today we're going to be going over my top 10 reads of 2021. Exciting stuff! This is just, hey, this is the best stuff I read in 2021. I think you might like it too. Let's go! Speaking of let's go and start off with talking about some honorable mentions in no particular order.
I feel like I cheated on my videos when I did my favorites of last year because I don't think I did any honorable mentions. I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and check. Maybe I did one, but I think that's it.
I didn't order these from best to worst. They're just some books that I also really loved and would be remiss not to mention in this video. Starting with Xenos, the introduction I personally had to the Warhammer 40k literature universe, and was maybe the biggest surprise of the year. I quite ignorantly went in expecting some schlock based off a board game that wouldn't hold a candle to some of the best sci-fi fantasy I read.
This one worries me because while I want to be interested in it, I think because Daniel Greene loves Wheel of Time and I've had a rocky relationship with Wheel of Time, this seems to kind of hit in a similar way to like more older traditional work. And I'm not into Malazan. I'm not hugely into Wheel of Time. So I think Warhammer might be down the similar vibe to those works in terms of traditionalism. And I don't like the comic book style of traditional comics either. Maybe this one's not for me, but maybe future Beck will decide otherwise, who knows.
Next up we have The Lost War. This was an indie release that I just found to be extremely charming and actually have a twist that was successfully landed brilliantly. Not something you always see from an indie author, and I recommend you check it on out. Then we have Pawn's Gambit from Rob J. Hayes, an author who I think is absolutely slaying it and may be the most underappreciated putting out books right now.
I haven't heard of either of those, but given that they're like indie published comics, definitely going to give them a try, especially after what he said about the plot twist thing. Probably future Beck on a TBR.
The Black Tides of Heaven was a book that I found to be maybe too smart for its own good. The concepts and premise here are outstanding.
This kind of reminds me of how I reacted to the 5th season. I loved the 5th season, but at the end I was like, was I too dumb for that?
So I'm very conflicted about how I feel about this one. I highly recommend it, but I just couldn't put it in my top 10.
I wonder if I'd be able to put it higher than he put it, because I've got similar crossover reading tastes, but sometimes they really vary. So I'm wondering if this one might end up falling in my ballpark when it doesn't quite fall in his ballpark, because maybe it's an honorable mention for him, but it's not an honorable mention for me, and it turns out being a favorite.
Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson. This was a really surprising book from Neil Stephenson, whose only other literature entry I've read up to this point was Anathema, which you can say is a bit different than Snow Crash, and seeing that level of diversity from the author alone is impressive enough for it to get a mention here. But on top of that, Snow Crash is just freaking great, and if you're into the cyberpunk aesthetic, it's a must-read for me.
I don't know if I'm into the cyberpunk aesthetic, but I can give it a shot. The only other book that I know by this author, I think, is The Something of Dodo, which is a really thick science fiction book, and I don't know if it was actually a series that got finished, and I never ended up reading it. I hauled it years ago and then got rid of it. So maybe I'll give this author a try as well. I was expecting a lot more books on this list that I've actually heard of, and so far all of them have been surprises.
But okay, let's go ahead and start the official top 10 list. And we're going to go ahead and kick it off with a book that I had problems with, but is actually maybe the book I have recommended the most this year of anything I've read. And that's going to be The Song of Achilles. I, again, had almost no expectations walking on into this one, but was pleasantly surprised in what turned to be a refreshing and nuanced take on a classic story.
I agree with his comment that it was a refreshing take and very nuanced as well. I've read this book, I gave it 4 stars. A lot of people said that it made them cry. To me, it just made me emotional. It didn't make me cry, but I did really love the telling of it. I really enjoyed the audiobook as well. And so this is a big tick because the first book on his official list, I've actually read and given 4 stars. So crossing my fingers that I recognize the others, and maybe a few of them I haven't read yet.
Next up is going to be Fugitive Telemetry, the latest entry in the Murderbot series. And Murderbot is going to be something that people know I am just a tremendous fan of from basically the second I picked it up, and it's not going to be surprising to see this entry on my list. What I will say is adding new to the conversation is after I've reread some Murderbot and I have kind of done some more pondering on the series, I really think the novella format is perfect for what this series needs to be.
Which is funny because I want the opposite of that. I've read the first two Murderbot Diaries novellas and I wanted them to be longer because I wanted more characters involved. Murderbot is like a mercenary robot / human hybrid, and all they want is to be left alone so they can watch their shows, but they keep being called to work to become a security bot basically. But I didn't love the way that we got different characters in the first two novellas, and so I couldn't really connect with the side characters because they changed. And then I didn't care about Murderbot enough yet because I hadn't experienced enough time with them yet. So while I wanted to continue this series, I ended up DNFing it quite early, but maybe I need to go and Google Martha Wells, the author, and see if there's any more detail and depth that I'm missing, because this seems like a series on paper that I would love, but it's just really not hit the mark for me. So I know I just said that I loved The Song of Achilles as well, and that I hope that meant that I would love the others, but apparently not, because I DNF'd the next series he's talking about. So 1 and 0 apparently.
Maybe the best cover of 2021, we have at number 8, The Shadow of the Gods. Seeing John Gwynne kick off a new series with such amazing success is just heartwarming, because when authors start having larger and larger back catalogs for new readers, it can be impossible or borderline so to start their newer work. And so I love that John Gwynne has provided an entry point where he is at the top of his craft, and people who are curious about his writing can jump in for a brand new series that is going to display all the things his fans have been preaching about him for years.
I have DNF'd the Bloodsong series in the past, and I only gave Waking Fire a 3 stars. To be fair, I loved Bloodsong. I gave that a 4 stars, but I haven't really loved this author. So the fact that Anthony Ryan has written something new, I'm like, okay, maybe I will try it. It's kind of been on my radar as something to potentially pick up because I know it follows Norse mythology, but if this follows more than one perspective, I think I'm going to struggle. But hopefully he's developed his writing to a point now, like Daniel Green said, so that I will actually enjoy his work more. Oh wait, I got the author wrong. It's John Gwynne, not Anthony Ryan. Same. I read Malice by John Gwynne and I found it kind of okay, but not incredible. And now that there is another book in his catalogue that's completely separate, I haven't read all of the Malice books and I haven't read his continuation series set a couple of 100 years later. I haven't cared. So I think now that he's written something else, I will give it a try, I think. I just hope that he's learned more how to progress his tropes beyond what they initially set up. So that is the major issue I had with Malice. It felt very tropey and it didn't feel like it was subverting that very much, and then at the same time I wanted to be more interested in the characters and I didn't feel that connection. So hopefully it's something that I can jump into and enjoy, because he's an author that a lot of fantasy people like and I want to like him too.
And at number 7 we have a book I have yet to review here on the channel as well, and that is going to be Leviathan Falls, the latest entry in the Expanse series and the conclusion.
It's safe to say I haven't read the conclusion of the Expanse series, but I do have book 3, and it's a series I'm enjoying. I've got a spoiler review of the second book, Caliban's War, and I do plan on reading the third book this year at some time. So it's nice to see that the book to conclude the series is actually out, and then it's been really well received. So if that's any indication, I'm probably gonna like the conclusion of the series as well. So far, we're doing ups and downs here with our reading tastes.
At number 6, we have one book from a series that I really struggled to pick just one entry from because I finished it this year, so I may have just defaulted to the first, but in my heart of hearts, I think it might actually be my favorite, and that is going to be Hyperion, the first entry in the Hyperion series. This is a sci-fi classic that I personally hadn't picked up until now, and now that I have, I'm wondering, why? Why did it take me so long? And why isn't this talked about more in the circles of GOAT fantasy series? It's solid all the way through. I don't get all the dissent I see around the second half. And me personally, Dan Simmons is now probably in my top 5 sci-fi authors just from this series alone. It's a repackaging of the Canterbury Tales.
This makes me hyped to start Hyperion because I've been looking for sci-fi series to start. So Hyperion has just jumped right onto my TBR. I really hope that our reading taste aligns here because there is a lot of sci-fi that I can be very picky about, and I'm hoping that Hyperion tends to fall in the good camp rather than the meh side. So cross your fingers, because if it's kind of a reimagining or retelling of the Canterbury Tales, I don't like fairy tale retellings that much. Just hope. Because I'm hoping. It's all I can do.
Next up was we have another book that I lent out and don't have a physical copy of. Really professional, Daniel. Cut in, not because of corrupted data, which you'll get later in the video, fun fact, because I screwed up titles here. I accidentally said Mad Ship when I meant Ship of Magic, which was the strongest of the Live Ship Traders trilogy for me. I actually have finished Ship of Destiny now, and I thought it was as good as Mad Ship. Maybe a little bit worse, but in the end, I like Ship of Magic the most, though when I've spoken on these in the past, I've confused their titles. Yay!
Heck yes, I love Robin Hobb, so this is a massive tick. You can see me nodding as he was talking. Yes.
At number 4, we have Dark Age by Pierce Brown, possibly the glow-up author of the list, because after reading the first Red Rising book, I probably would have just said, oh, I don't like Pierce Brown as an author very much, but this man has evolved and grown and sharpened his craft, where so many of the areas of his writing were so caked in bits I didn't like that needed to be polished off. I couldn't even see the strengths that were there, but I'm happy to report, as of Dark Age, Pierce Brown has shed so much of the clunkiness of his early writing and truly become one of the great voices of epic modern sci-fi.
That's interesting because I felt opposite with this series. I loved Red Rising, Golden Sun and Morning Star and was obsessed with all of them, but when it came to reading Iron Gold and Dark Age, I didn't love them as much. And I think that might just be a reflection of past Beck's reading taste, because I've definitely obviously grown, like literally, because that's what time does. But with my reading taste, I've become a lot more analytical. So I think when I look back and reread this series, which I plan to at least do or start this year, I think when I reread this series, I might be reminiscent or at least relating to what Daniel's just said. This series has definitely grown. It initially started in very small scale and it's grown massively, which is what you hope for when it comes to a series like this, because you want to see more developed in the world and with the characters and the detail and the tensions as well. I think the next installments really developed what had come before them, but I don't know if it's because of the way it treated certain characters from the first trilogy. I think it might be that I had an emotional reaction to it rather than an analytical one. So it'll be interesting to see if my thoughts align with what Daniel said when I do a reread, because I've got a little bit more perspective now, and also I know what has already happened, so I won't be as blindsided by all of the plot twists and the drama of the writing style. I'll actually be able to sit with it and go, oh, okay, this is what it's doing and aiming for, and this is how it set everything up. So I'm going to have a bit more of an open perspective when I reread them. So it'll be interesting to see if I feel the same way.
And at number 3, we have what a lot of people will probably have assumed be number 1, but I'm oddly going to be taking this as just one whole series because I couldn't necessarily break it up. And that's going to be the entirety of One Piece. Now, before you attack me for just considering it one story, please know from my perspective and a structure standpoint, it really was.
One Piece is an anime and manga that I have been very afraid of, even though I do really love anime and manga and I've wanted to start it just because it's got so much filler and I don't know what to watch and what not to watch and what to skip and when to get invested. It's just a lot. And it's got so much content in there. And so if I read it, I've got to figure out how, because I'm not going to buy it, because that's just a lot of money invested where I'm not confident that I'll love everything. So I need to figure out how I can source it, first of all, and then second of all, where to actually start and what to read. Because I love anime, I love manga, I just haven't read One Piece, which is kind of like a manga and anime fans' cardinal sin, because it's such a well-known series. So now I've aired my secret that I haven't read One Piece.
And if you've been paying attention on the channel, you know there are 2 books that I have read that I have considered of just beyond exceptional quality. And it's been very hard for me to pick just one to be my favorite of the year. It's not an easy thing to make myself do. But after a lot of debate, I've decided that my number 2 spot is going to go to The Wisdom of Crowds. This really is equally on par with Jade Legacy in nearly every sense. The only reason I'm giving it the number 2 spot instead of the number 1 was I had a bit more of an emotional response to Jade Legacy as a reader than I did Wisdom of Crowds.
Interesting, because I've read one of them and I haven't read the other, but I've read the first book in the series. So, to be more specific, I've read Jade City, which is the first book in the Fonda Lee series, and I haven't read, obviously, the sequels. I gave the first book 3 stars. I didn't really care too much about it, and I felt the pacing was very slow. So I think that's where Daniel Green and I really diverge when it comes to our reading taste. Obviously, he's read Wheel of Time many times, and that has long pacing issues, at least in my subjective reading opinion. Books are art. Everyone experiences them differently, right? So he obviously really likes stuff that's more drawn out. Maybe that's a generalization, maybe not. I don't obviously know all the things he reads. But for me, I don't connect to things as deeply if they're drawn out, and especially with Jade City, because I listened to that on audiobook. So I liked the world building, I liked the gang setup, I liked the tension, and I liked the familiar relationships. I liked all the characters because you got different perspectives. So I imagine it only further develops them as each book in the series conveys their stories, but I didn't really care about them. There was something that happened as a plot twist in book 1, and it was seeming to be a really emotional moment, but I was like, oh, that was interesting. So instead of hitting me, it just kind of flowed through me and past me. And so that's why I haven't continued. Ultimately, I'm not going to continue that series. I've DNF'd it now. It feels like I'm wasting my time when I could be reading something else that I know will be a 4 stars or above. And I've actually read Wisdom of Crowds by Joe Abercrombie, and I'm a huge Abercrombie fan, but this book felt a little bit different to what he's written in the past. I don't mean that necessarily in a, this was completely different regarding voice, tone, and execution, but it felt kind of like someone had drawn a picture and then erased over it, so all the hard lines were gone, and you got like the, I guess, the formula of it and what it should look like. But it felt like it wasn't a conclusion of a series. It felt like it was book 3 out of a quartet, for example. I thought it was going to be a lot stronger and harder, and I didn't have the emotional connection to it that Daniel Green said he had. So it's really cool to see that we've got some stuff that cross over, but at the same time, it's really cool to see how we diverge. And I'm interested to see whether the other books on this list that he mentioned, both honorable and official part of his list, are books that I'll actually enjoy as well. I do plan on reading these sometime this year. I'm not exactly sure when, but I'll probably squeeze it in sometime soon. If you have any reading tastes that cross over with mine or with Daniel's, let me know. I would love to hear from you. But thank you so much for watching this video. I'll come chat to you down below in the comments, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.